Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to our webinar today, Year-End Part 1, Install and Prepare. So this is the first part of a two-part series of webinars, and we do have Year-End Part 2 running from the 7th of March through to mid-April. My name's Duncan, I'm one of your presenters today, and I am joined by my colleague Alice, who will be presenting alongside me. And in the background, we do have a team of experts ready to answer your questions in the form of James, Ollie and Paddy. So we'll explain how to send those questions through when we run through the housekeeping. So Alice is going to disappear for now, and she'll be back to present the section on installing the update. Let's now take a look at what we're going to cover in the webinar. So I'm going to start things off with an introduction to your payroll year-end key dates and deadlines. And then I'm going to be handing over to my colleague Alice, who will be taking us through installing the year-end update, providing some top tips for a smooth installation of that update. I will then return to take you through preparing for year-end, which will involve finishing payroll for the current tax year and getting ready for the year-end process. And then Alice will take you through the further support that's available, and we're going to come back online and answer some of your questions. So that's what we've got in store for you today. Let's get straight on to our introduction, where I'm going to run you through some key payroll year-end dates. So the first one on our timeline is early March. That is the release date for our payroll year-end update. It was actually released yesterday and is available as both an automatic update in your software and as a manual download from our help center. So that is version 30. And Alice is going to talk to you about how to get that installed and get everything updated. The next date on our timeline is the 5th of April. Now, this is the last day of the current tax year, and by that date, you will have finished your payroll for your last pay date of the tax year and have submitted the FPS for that last pay date. The following date, the 6th of April, is the first day of the new tax year. So any pay date from the 6th of April onwards would fall into 2024 to 25. And then we have a couple of deadlines to be aware of. We have the 19th of April, which is the deadline to do your final submission of the tax year. Now, this is a step that you will complete as part of the year-end process, which we cover in part 2. And the second deadline is the 31st of May. So that's the deadline to issue a P60 to all current employees. That is any employee that was still employed by you as at the 5th of April. So leavers who left before the 5th of April don't get a P60, they would get a P45 instead. So those are just some key dates for your diary. And just to explain the format of our webinars, in part 1 today, we're going to be covering install and prepare. So these are the tasks leading up to your last pay date in the tax year. And then in part 2, we'll be running through the payroll year-end process, including that final submission and producing the P60s. So get yourself signed up to part 2 if you haven't already done so. So that's it for me for now, but we're going to bring Alice back, who's going to run us through installing your year-end update. So over to you, Alice.
Thank you, Duncan. Yes, let's move on to installing the year-end update then. So this is version 30 of Sage 50 Payroll and will soon become a mandatory update. So we've prepared like a little preparation checklist for you, just a couple of bits of best practice to help you prepare to install the update and ensure that all goes smoothly. You can still install the update though without doing any of this. Don't panic if you've not done it. So first on the list is optimizing your data. This is basically like a little spring clean for the payroll, makes sure everything's where it needs to be and tidies up the data too. You can run the optimize whenever you'd like. The only thing is you can't optimize the company that you're currently logged into, but I will show you how to do this a little bit later on in the demonstration. Next is to check your program directory, and it's just literally to make a note of it from help and about in your program, so you can confirm which files are going to be updated during the installation. After this, it's to check that automatic updates are going to be turned on, which will allow the payroll to check for any updates in the future and prompt you to get these downloaded and installed. But just bear in mind with automatic updates, there are some external things which can affect them, such as like antivirus software you might have installed or firewall. But don't worry, if you don't use the automatic updates for any reason, you can still always access our updates and download them from the Help Centre. And then last thing on this checklist is to back up your payroll data onto something like a USB stick or something external, maybe like a OneDrive or something like that as well. Super important all year round to back up your data, but especially around installations and payroll year end, because if anything was to go wrong, having backup files saved means you can restore that data again and then pick up where you've left off. A little top tip as well, name your backups appropriately. For example, pre-install backup. That way you know exactly what's been backed up and exactly where you were at that time as well. So I'm just going to turn my camera off and we'll go to a demonstration of these steps. So I'll just bring up my payroll. And first things first was the optimize of the data. So this is a process that you'll go through when you're opening the program and logging into your company, or by going to File in the top left and Open Company. You can only do it for one company at a time, and you might remember me saying that you can't do it for a company that you're already logged into. So if I tried to do it on this company which I'm logged into at the moment, I'd get a little error message like this. But alternatively, I can pick any other company, just highlight it and click on Optimize. And that's all you need to click. Payroll does all the hard work for you, and it'll bring up a message just to say the data has been optimized once it's done. So it's nice and quick. Now I'm just going to log back into this company for now. So I'll let that load up. And I'm going to show you next how to check your program directory. So we'll come off the home page for now. That's a new feature of version 30, which I'll show you a little bit more of later. But now that we're back in this company, we're going to go to Help and About. And in the Program Details section, you'll notice you can see the program directory. So mine is the C drive, and it's then in the Program Files x86 folder, followed by the Sage Payroll folder. So all I need to do for this step is make a note of this just for later, and you'll see why a little bit later on as well. The next step on that checklist was to check the automatic updates are turned on. So for this, just go to Tools along the top and Internet Options, and you'll see this window comes up. Now it's just the first tab you'll need, the Software Updates tab. And you can see you've either got the option for automatic updates, which is recommended, or manual. So it's basically just check which one that you prefer. Automatic obviously checks automatically for those updates and will prompt you to download them. So if that's going to be suitable for yourself, select that and click OK. Now just bear in mind for those automatic updates as well, you do also need an internet connection for them. Then last thing on that checklist was backups. So you are prompted in a few different steps of your pay run to back up your data, for example in the Update Records wizard. But you can also do one whenever you fancy by just going to File and Backup. So I'll take one now. So just click through the wizard. If you click on Browse, you can choose where you save it as well, and I'm just going to call it Pre-install Backup. And I'll click Next. Should be nice and quick. There we go. And that's all you do to back up your data. So we'll just go back to the slides for a moment, a little bit back to that checklist. So we optimize the data first of all, which you can do when you're opening the program, or you can go to File and Open Company. And you do that in there. And remember, you can't do that for a company that you're already logged into. We then check the program directory, which is just in Help and About. Check the automatic updates are switched on, which is in Tools and Tools and Update, and then back up your payroll data, which you can do anytime you want by going to File and Backup. So it's a few pieces of best practice just for a nice smooth installation, but remember, if you haven't done any of these and you still installed the update, that's absolutely fine as well. So now that we've prepared to install, the next step is to actually download that update. Now, if you've turned on automatic updates, this is the window that you'll see if you haven't yet updated to version 30. So all you'll need to do is click download now, and that's going to download the update for you, nice and easy. Now, if you don't have automatic backups turned on, automatic updates, sorry, you can still access these from the Help Centre, like I mentioned, or from our Payroll Year End Hub, which looks a little bit something like this. I'll just bring it across. So you get to this either by the link in the handout, or just go to sage.co.uk/PYE. You'll then select Sage 50 Payroll, And you can see this hub has all of the different steps for payroll year-end, including downloading and installing that year-end update as well. So nice and easy to get to. Once you've downloaded the update, do make sure that payroll is closed first of all, but also any other Sage products that you've got. So if you've got Sage 50 accounts open as well, for example. If you do accidentally leave them open though, there is a message just to let you know that you need to close them before the update can go ahead. So don't worry too much if you've accidentally left it open. After this, you'll be able to run the file which is downloaded, in which you'll be faced with the messages on this slide. Now, all these are asking is if you accept the license, followed by a message confirming your program directory. So this is why we advise to take a little note of it, just so you can make sure the installation has picked up and detected the correct program to update. So all you'd do here is click yes and let the installer do its thing. Now, if it does come up with the wrong program directory there, all you'd need to do is click no and then browse to the file location that you'd noted down a little bit earlier on. The installer will then do its thing, so it's just a case of waiting for that. Normally only takes a few minutes, but it does depend on how quick your computer is. Some environmental factors can affect that, for example. But once it's done and the update is done, you will get a message to let you know that Sage 50 Payroll has been successfully updated. And before you continue, we recommend you save any work and restart your computer. The restart is optional as well, so you don't have to do that, but by all means, if you've got time, restart your computer. After installing, when you first open the program and log into your company, the payroll is going to automatically update and optimize your data, as you can see on the screenshot on the right-hand side. And this is to upgrade the payroll data to version 30. So once you're logged into your payroll company, it should look a little bit something like this, and you will see the home page. That's going to be your default view when you open the program. So this is a new addition in version 30. Like I said, will be the default view, so that's going to be the first thing you see. And the content on here will change from time to time, but this is kind of a one-stop shop for anything important really with payroll. So at the moment, you can see we've got some key dates for payroll year end on one of the tiles. So if you wanted to know a little bit more about them, just click view the calendar and it comes up with an article here. Click on any of the key dates and learn a little bit more about them. And at the moment, there's also information on free webinars, so the webinars that we run for yourselves, and also online services and things like that. So just easy access really to certain topics and support. So I'm just going to go back to the payroll section, and I'd like to show you where you can change the view in payroll now, because you might notice there used to be a change view option in the top right, which is not there any longer. So for example, if you'd processed payroll year end, which we'll cover in part 2, and then we're back to payroll, you can see that process map is still there. So you'd normally have changed that in the top right by going to change view, but you can now find that by going to view and change view. So it's just moved. It does the same thing, just in a slightly different place. So in change view, I'd just click on employee list, and that gets rid of that process map and it brings you back to the employee list. Now a little top tip from us really as well, there is another way of doing that. So if you're in payroll year end, what you can actually do is just click on employee first and then back to payroll, and that does the same thing and gets rid of that process map for you as well. Now there is another option, it's a bit more customizable as well, the home page. So if you don't want that to be your default view when you open the program, say you just want this normal payroll page that you used to have, you do have the option to change this to whatever you'd prefer. And to do this, just go to view and options, and in the environment tab on the window that comes up, there's a little drop down for initial view. At the moment it's set to home, so when you update that's what it'll be set to, but if I wanted it to be the payroll screen when I opened the program each time, I'd just change it in there and then click OK. So whatever you'd want in that, totally preference. But yeah, now that we've installed the update, we've got back into the company, we're logged back in. I would advise as well just going to help and about and checking that you're on the correct version number. So we'll just go in there now, and we can see again in the program details, we've got the version number at the top, which is version 30. So as long as it starts with 30, you're good to go. So I'm just going to go back to the slides again and touch a little bit on network installations as well. So not everyone will have a network installation, but if you do have other colleagues who do payroll, or you've got it on multiple computers, for example, each computer that's got payroll installed must be updated to version 30 as well. Once the first one of you upgrades to version 30 and opens the program, you might remember me saying that the data is upgraded too. So if another colleague tried to open payroll without updating to version 30, they might get an error message, something like the one on this slide. The errors can look a little bit scary, but all this means is that the company's data has been upgraded to version 30, so it can't be opened in version 29 anymore. All you need to do to fix this is just make sure everyone downloads that update for version 30. So that kind of brings us to the end of installing, really. So you should have had your update all installed by now. It's now time to bring Duncan back, and we'll move on to preparing for year end.
Thank you very much, Alice. So you've seen there the first step of payroll year end, which is to install your update. So I'm going to then show you the next step, which is preparing for the year end process. And a lot of this is completing your final payrolls of 2023 to 24. But I'm going to take you through a 5-step checklist. So here is the checklist on screen. Now, step number 1 when approaching year end is to check if you will have what's known as a week 53. Now, this step only applies to weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly pay frequencies. So if you're on a monthly payroll, you can go straight on to step 2. If you are weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly, I'll show you how to check in just a few moments. Step 2 is to process and update your final pay period of 2023 to 24. So check your calendar, work out what your last pay date of the year will be. Step 3 is to process leavers if they've left in the current tax year and they've received their final pay for the year. Step 4 is to submit your FPS for your last pay date, and if required, an EPS for month 12. And then step 5 is to take a backup of your data before you then go in to the year-end process. So I'm going to talk you through some of these steps, also give you some demonstrations, and we're going to start with week 53. Now this year, we're expecting week 53 to perhaps be a bit more common than it was last year for 2 reasons. So first of all, it's a leap year in 2024. So the tax year has 366 days, which means there are 2 pay dates that would result in a week 53. And secondly, those pay dates, those days of the week are Thursday and Friday, which tend to be quite popular dates for paying staff weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly. Now, the reason a week 53 comes about is due to the fact that the number of days in a year doesn't divide into an exact number of weeks. So in 2023 to 24, those 366 days divided by 7 results in 52 full weeks and 2 extra days. So depending on when your pay date lands, and it's the pay date that's key here, not the date the employee worked up to or the date you're paying them up to, the date that they get paid. If it lands on either Thursday the 4th of April or Friday the 5th of April, you will have a week 53 this year. Now, if you're still not sure, I'm just going to show you how you can check by using our tax calendars. So if I just bring the slides down for a moment, we have a guide which contains some downloadable tax week and tax month calendars, which I'm just showing you here. And if we look at the calendar for 23 to 24, you'll see that this is laid out starting on the 6th of April, which is the first day of the tax year. You've got your week numbers here on the left-hand side. And if we go all the way to the end of the calendar, you'll see after 52 whole weeks, there are 2 days, 4th and 5th, that would result in a week 53. So check your pay dates. If you're weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly, and your pay date is due to land on either of those dates, you will have a week 53. Now, there's nothing you need to do differently if you have a week 53 when you come to process it. There are special rules that apply around the tax calculation. So that'll be done on a week 1 basis based on just the earnings in that period. And that's all in line with HMRC legislation. So it's for awareness more than anything else. And if you do have a week 53, you may find that later on in the new tax year, employees may receive a P800 notice of underpaid or overpaid tax, and then that could result either in a tax code change for them or direct settlement with HMRC. But as a payroll operator, all you need to do is to process them pay runs as normal If you do pay monthly or your regular pay date doesn't land on those dates, then you will not have a week 53 this year. So we'll move on to step 2, and we're now going to process our last period of the year. So I'm just going to switch my camera off. I'll bring the slides down. And if we go into payroll, I'm going to give you a demo of my last pay run of the year. Now, I'm running a monthly payroll, so I definitely don't have a week 53. And I pay my employees on the last day of each calendar month. So what I've done is I've already set my process date to my employees' pay date, which will be the 31st of March. Now, processing the last period of the year is the same as any other period, but if you have any directors who are set up on the pro rata basis, director status, it will result in a recalculation of their national insurance when you process this period. Now, I'll show you where you can check a director status. So I have one director on my payroll. And when I go into the employee record, if I click onto employment, you'll see director status over here on the right-hand side. So I've got this one set to pro rata basis, whereas the other director status is annual basis. And because they're on pro rata basis, it means that the NI will be recalculated when we process month 12 in this case. So I'll just select all of my employees and I'll go into the enter payment screen. Now I do have some leavers in the list and employees marked on hold. So because they're not being paid this period, I would simply click yes to deselect them. That then takes us into the enter payment screen. And remember, this is the director on the pro rata basis, and the national insurance for the director is quite a bit higher than what they usually pay on their monthly salary. And I'll explain how that's happened in the recalculation in just a few minutes. But you'll find with these directors, when you save their payments, it does confirm that they were recalculated on a year-to-date basis. Now I'm going to enter the rest of the employees' payments in the usual way. Now I do currently have an employee on paternity leave. So I've paid them a statutory parental payment, which I'll be reclaiming as usual at the end of this month. And then for the rest of my employees, just enter their payment information. And then you would continue with payroll as normal. So you'd run pay slips, payment summary reports, and any other pre-update reports. You'd upload your pay slips if you're using online services. And then once you're happy with all your reports, you can update the records. This is one of the steps where we recommend you take a backup. So you could take a pre-update backup in the usual way. And once you've done that, you would continue through the update records wizard. And we get the confirmation there that our 8 monthly employees have now been updated. And just as a quick check to see if you've updated the records for your last pay date, have a scan down the last updated column. So in my case, it says 31st of March, which is my last pay date of the year. And that confirms that I have processed and updated my final pay date of the tax year. Now, I did want to go back to directors just to explain how that recalculation was done. Now, the way that directors' national insurance works is that by the end of the tax year, all directors, regardless of status, must have paid the correct national insurance contributions based on their cumulative earnings and the annual directors' NI thresholds and rates. Now, if they're on the annual basis status, this happens throughout the year. So they don't pay any national insurance until their cumulative earnings are above the relevant primary threshold, so that's 12,570 per year. And the same for the employer's contribution. It wouldn't kick in until the cumulative earnings are above the annual secondary threshold. But with pro rata basis, it provides a more convenient way for directors to pay their national insurance if they get paid roughly the same each period, as it allows them to spread it more evenly throughout the year by using the relevant weekly or monthly thresholds to calculate it in the same way as a non-director with a recalculation in the last period of the year. So that's why we saw the message come up in the demo. And just be aware that because there was a change to the employees' NI rate effective the 6th of January 2024, it means that for annual calculations involving directors, The employee rate is blended at 11.5%, which represents 9 months at the old rate, 12%, and 3 months at the new rate of 10%. So this is your average over that 12-month period. 11.5%, if you're checking any director calculations, is what's going to be used for the employee percentage on earnings up to the upper earnings limit. Now, looking more closely at the employee who had a recalculation, I just want to explain why the national insurance was different to what it normally is. So if you look at the employee's monthly payment amounts, usually they get a salary of £2,750. But there was 1 month during this year, in December, where they received an annual bonus. And at the time, we take a look at the NI contributions, the national insurance went up, as you'd expect, but the earnings for that month were above the upper earnings limit, or the monthly upper earnings limit. So a lot of that national insurance was calculated at 2%. Now, when you look at the earnings for the full year, it's £40,500, which is actually less than the annual upper earnings limit. So what's happened in month 12, when you look at the contributions, is that the employee contribution has increased substantially so that they've paid the correct amount of national insurance based on their annual earnings. So effectively, they're paying the NI that was due on their bonus payment that they received in December. So regardless of the status, they would have ended up paying the same amount of national insurance over the course of the year. It's just when it was paid is determined by the director status. And it's why the pro rata basis is more suited to directors who have a steady income, the same amount each period. And if there's going to be variable pay, you might consider using the annual basis. But ultimately, it's up to you and your director to decide which director status to choose. So that's step 2. We're just going to rejoin the demo. So if I just go full screen again for you. We've updated the records, and at this point, we need to consider whether we need to make anyone a leaver. So usually you would deal with your leavers at the point they leave. And actually in my employee list, I have one employee who is already marked as a leaver, and they left in December, and that was when their last payment was made. So if you've had anyone that you've paid for the last time on your last pay date, you should make them a leaver now so that their leaving details can be included in your next FPS. And you might have some staff that's been on your payroll for a while, so it's a good time to have a check to see whether them have actually left and whether you may want to make them a leaver at this point before the end of the tax year. Now, I've reviewed my employees, and I do have an employee marked on hold. So this is typically used for seasonal employees who don't work each period. In fact, this employee is a student, and they work generally during the student holidays. Now, if they're going to return to work for you at some point, you don't need to do anything with their status. You can leave them on hold until the next time they need to be paid. If they have left, if they're not going to do any more work for you and they've received their final payment, you'd probably want to make them a leaver now so that you can issue a P45. So I'm going to leave my employee on hold. They're still going to get a P60 because they've done some work during the year. And when I next need to pay them in the new tax year, that is when I'm going to take this employee off of hold. So we've dealt with leavers. I don't have any that I need to process. So I'm going to move on to step 4, which is to submit my FPS. And then if required, submit an EPS for month 12. So to send the FPS, I'm going to click on the full payment submission option in my payroll tasks. Now you can ignore this warning. This only comes up because I'm in a training room. So we'll just get rid of that. And that will take you into the usual FPS submission screen where we click continue. We check our gateway registration and company details. And then it gives us a summary of the submission. Now in some payroll software, you'll have an option to mark the last FPS as the final submission for the year. However, with Sage 50 Payroll, you can't do that because you will always do a final submission as part of the year-end process, which is actually sent as an EPS. So the reason why this indicator here, final submission for year, is reading no, is because you will be doing at least one further submission as part of the year-end process. So there's nothing you can do to change that. It's the way that the program's designed. And what you would do is simply submit your full payment submission in the usual way. That has gone through and has been successful. And if you want to check that you've done it, you can scan down your last FPS date, and you'll see that that now matches my last updated date and displays my last pay date of the year. Now for month 12, because I processed a statutory payment that I'm reclaiming, and I'll just show you on my P32 report, I've got some statutory paternity pay that I've recovered this month. And for this reason, I will need to send an EPS for month 12. But again, this isn't the final submission. This is a normal EPS used to recover a statutory payment. So I'm going to do that from the e-submissions tasks. I'm going to click onto Employer Payment Summary. I'll select the reason why I'm sending it. So I'm adjusting a payment because I've recovered statutory pay. And then if I continue through this wizard, this is for month 12. It shows all of the values recovered for the tax year to date. So previously in the year, I've recovered maternity pay. So that year-to-date value is included in this submission. And if I'm happy with those values, I would go ahead and make the submission. And the same goes if you are reclaiming CIS deduction suffered. You would do that EPS in the usual way, or if you're paying apprenticeship levy. So just to point out, this one is not the final submission of the year. It's done separately in the year-end process. So I would simply click Submit. That'll be sent to HMRC, and that's it done. So just as an aside, if you did a reclaim of statutory payments earlier in the year, but you forgot to send an EPS, you can get it sent for the final period of the year, because it will send the year-to-date value of what's been reclaimed. And if you can't remember whether you sent one, just have a check in your e-submissions log, and this will contain a record of all submissions that have been made. So I've got some previous EPS submissions in this list, and I've got the most recent one that I've done just now. So one last step in the checklist was to take a backup. Alice showed you this earlier, but I will show you again. From the File menu, you'd come down to the Backup option. That then takes you into the Backup wizard. We always recommend that you back up the files that are selected automatically. So these 7 sets of files here. And then you'll be able to browse to a suitable location. Give your backup a name. We call it PYE backup. And then you've got your safety net. You've got a point you can come back to if you need to at the point you were ready to process year end. So let's just come back and recap those last few steps. So we dealt with our levers. If anyone had left in the last period of the year, or there's someone you forgot to make a lever earlier in the year. We then did an FPS for our last pay date, but it's not marked as the final submission. And in my case, I did an EPS because I am reclaiming statutory payments, but there will be another separate EPS when we do year end itself. So that's our checklist. We checked if we had a week 53. Remember, it's weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly, where your regular pay date falls on either Thursday the 4th or Friday the 5th of April. We've processed and updated our final pay period for 23 to 24. We've processed levers. You can only do this once you've paid them for the last time. We've submitted the FPS and EPS for month 12, and we've taken a backup of our data. And that's us ready. We are now prepared for payroll year end, but there's one last thing you might want to consider at this point as you're planning for this yourselves, and that is around how you are going to be sending your P60s. So the P60 is the end of year summary that you send to all current employees. So anyone who has not left as at the 5th of April. And there are 3 different ways you can send them from Sage 50 Payroll. So the first option is to do online P60s. So if you've set up online pay slips and your employees log into Sage HR online services, either on the app or through the website, you can upload your P60s in much the same way. And we'll show you how to do that in part 2. There are email P60s. So if you currently email payslips, it will use the same settings. So the same passwords, same email addresses as it does for payslips. Or if you print your documents, you can print P60s, and you don't even need stationery. You can print directly onto plain paper. And the stationery is actually no longer available from Sage or HMRC. So we've simplified that process with the option of printing onto plain. We are nearly at the end of the presentation. So we're actually going to bring Alice back at this point. And Alice, you're going to run us through some of the further support available. So over to you.
Thanks, Duncan. Yeah, I just want to kind of shine a little spotlight on the amazing support that we've got available to you, and make you aware of what it is and where you can find it as well. So starting with our part 2 webinar, which we've mentioned quite a few times during this one, starts on the 7th of March, and we've got multiple dates from then, so do take a look. If you want to register for that, you can either click the button in the handout, or like I mentioned before, sage.co.uk/PYE. That'll take you to the hub, and you've got a button there to register for the free webinars. In that, we'll talk you through step-by-step processing your year end, including that final submission that we were talking about as well. And then just a friendly reminder really that me and Duncan were here for all things Sage 50 Payroll. We do run webinars throughout the whole year on a variety of topics. Currently, obviously, they're quite payroll year end focused, but once payroll year end's over, we do have loads more in store for you on loads more topics as well. So it would be great if you come along to some of them as well. We also have the Sage Help Centre. Here you can access loads of great support guides. You can search the knowledge base with like keywords, anything you want to. We have demonstration videos, recordings of all of our webinars as well. And if necessary, you can get in touch if you needed to contact our experts for any reason as well. We've also got Sage University. This is now available from our homepage option as well in version 30. So you can access free e-learning, bite-sized learning, basically just expand your knowledge, and you can get some certifications for that training too. So that's a really great option. But yeah, that's kind of brought us almost to the end of the webinar. We do still have some time for questions though. There's a few I've picked out for you, Duncan, sent in from our attendees. So I just want to ask you a couple surrounding like the kind of topic of preparing for year end, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course, go ahead.
Perfect. So first one, it's how do I handle a leaver who left in March but is getting paid in April for their March hours?
Yeah, this is a common one actually this time of year. So you might have leavers that are generally, well, employees are generally paid in arrears. You don't tend to pay them in advance. So you might have someone that's left in late March, but's being paid for the last time in April in the new tax year. And the way that you deal with that is you do need to follow a specific process, which we've outlined actually in one of our support guides. So I'll show you how to find that first. If you search for leave a different tax year or words to that effect, you'll find the support guide for when the last pay date and the leave date are in different tax years, which is what we're describing in this scenario. And it actually takes you through the exact steps that you need to complete to do this. So first of all, you will need to process and update their final payment on the pay date in the new tax year so that that's recorded in your software. To make them a leaver, you would set your process date back into the previous tax year and enter their leaving date, and you would produce a P45 that way. And then you're going to get a P45 with a leave date and year-to-date values that match the period in which they officially left. You would then set your process date back to the current pay date to do your FPS, and that will submit the leave date and the leaving details to HMRC. So they've then got a P45, they take that to the next employer, and any of the pay and tax that they've paid in the new tax year will be fed through to the new employer via like a tax coding notification or similar. But this article, if you search for tax year, leave a different tax year, will give you the full steps.
Fabulous, thank you. And yeah, really great article as well. We just got two more. So the first one, can I process April's wages before completing payroll year end?
You can, it's definitely possible. What you will need to do is to make sure that you follow the steps to get ready for the new tax year. So you may need to clear week 1 flags on your tax codes, for example, apply any new P9 notices, but you can complete pay runs in the new tax year and return to do the year-end tasks by simply changing your process date back into the previous year. So 5th of April is the process date that we recommend for all year-end tasks. But if you've had to move on and start the new tax year, especially if you run a weekly payroll and you're pressed for time, you can go ahead and do that as long as you follow the steps for getting ready for the new tax year. And when you're ready to do year-end, set your process date back. And always keep in mind those deadlines. 19th of April, you need to do the final submission of the year by, and you've got until the end of May to do the P60, so plenty of time.
Great, thanks, Duncan. And the last one, when can I start year end? Do I need to wait until the 5th of April?
You don't have to wait, no, you can start year end as soon as you're ready. So if you've completed all of those steps in the checklist that I went through, so you've finished your last pay date of the tax year, you've submitted your FPS and EPS where required, you've dealt with any leavers that have been paid for the last time, you can get on and do your year end now. So make sure you've installed the update. First of all, make sure you've completed your last pay dates of the year, but you don't have to wait until the 5th of April. Don't have to wait till those deadlines. You can get it out of the way nice and early.
Perfect, thank you very much. Well, that's all the questions I picked out for yourself, so thanks for answering them.
Yeah, well, we've actually got some questions we had in for you, Alice, around the installation. So okay. I will put some of these to you now. So the first one we've got here is, can I install the update before completing the tax year?
You can, yes. In fact, you'll probably need to be honest, because the update's going to become mandatory soon. We don't have an exact date for it yet, but it's normally within the first few weeks of the release, which was yesterday. But yeah, the earlier you've got that update, the better, really, because then you've got everything you need for the new tax year, all of the new legislation and things as well.
Great. So yeah, get it installed nice and early. In fact, you probably will have to, depending on when your pay date is. Next question for you. What if I didn't optimize before I installed the update? Is that a problem?
It's not a problem, no. So don't worry if you didn't optimize before you did the update. Like I mentioned in those preparation steps, the kind of best practice, it is just that, it's best practice. So it's not vital. You can update without it. And to be honest, once the update's installed, the payroll data is automatically optimized anyway. So it's just kind of one of those steps to ensure it goes smoothly, but doesn't have to be done.
Great, that's reassuring, thank you. And one last one for you. This is in relation to the new home screen that people are noticing now. The question is, can I switch the home screen off?
So you can't switch the home screen off. It is set to the default view, like I mentioned before, but I'll just show you again. I just want to remind you how to actually change that if you did want to. So I'm just going to share my screen again. Just bear with me. There we go. And I'm just going to go, so yeah, home screen here. This is the first thing you'll see when you update the program. If you do want to change that, or not, I don't suppose you can't switch it off, but if you do want to change that, you'll just go to View in the top left and Options, and you're just looking for the Environment tab in the middle. Just change that initial view from home to whatever you want it to be. So payroll, whether you want it to be the company screen, the e-submissions, and whatever you'd prefer. And then you click OK. But if you do want to get back to it for whatever reason and you've changed the default view, all you can do, just switch back to home there. So yeah, it can't be switched off, but can be changed depending on your preference.
Great, so simple as that. Okay, so I think that's all of the questions that we had sent in before the webinar, but we're going to continue answering questions in the Q&A section. So myself and Alice are going to go on to mute just to help out with some of those questions. But we will come back to wrap up once we've got through most of those questions or we've reached the end of the time. So we will go on to mute now, but we'll come back towards the end when it's time to say goodbye. So speak to you shortly. Hi again, everyone, and thank you for sending your questions in. You've certainly kept the team busy behind the scenes, and I hope that the answers that we've sent back out have been useful. We are in the last 5 minutes of the scheduled webinar, so we are going to start to wrap things up. I can see the questions are slowing down a bit as well. Just want to say a massive thank you to you all for joining us at the webinar today, for giving up your time and joining us at this session. Please do get yourself signed up for part 2. The first session is on Thursday. We do have a few spaces left on that one, but plenty of other dates and times available as well. A quick favour to me and Alice is that if you wouldn't mind completing the exit survey when you come out of the webinar today, either when you exit yourself or when we close it down, we really do appreciate any thoughts that you might have on the webinar. We do read every one, and it helps us to keep these relevant to you and to keep them continually improved. There's also a link to that survey in the follow-up email that'll be sent out to you later on this afternoon, and you'll get a link to watch the recording of today's session. So for those of you asking about a recording, there is one. You'll get that up in your follow-up email, and that will be arriving later today. Don't forget, we've got our Spring Clean payroll webinars in April, which will give you the opportunity to earn a digital badge. So join myself and Alice for those if you can towards the back end of April, and you'll find recordings of recent sessions as well from our help centre. So we're going to wrap things up from this end while we stay online and just answer those very final questions. So on behalf of myself and Alice and the team behind the scenes, thanks once again for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at part 2. But from me, that's goodbye for now.